Hi, Year 3, it's Mrs. Silverthorne here again with some more maths. Last week we were looking at mass, but this week we're going to be looking at capacity. Now, to kick us off, let's get started with our warm-up. Now, our warm-up is one that we've done before. This is where we look at our links between the 5 times table and counting in 50. So if you want to have a little pause at the video here just to see if you can spot the pattern, that'd be great. And then let's have a little look. Can you go through, can you fill in these missing numbers? So if I'm counting in 50s, for A, I might go 50, 100, 150. What would be my missing answer here? And my missing answer here. Also take care because some of them do count backwards in 50s. So pause the video here and give it a go. Okay, so how did you get on? So have a little look, tick off the ones you got correct. There we go. And then when you're ready, we're going to jump straight in. Okay, so again with our mathematical vocabulary, one of the words that's going to be coming, I jumped forward. One of the words that's going to be coming up a lot is capacity. So capacity is the amount of space a liquid takes up. You might also hear this as volume. So you might say, what is the volume? Or you might hear, what is the capacity of a container? Okay, and the main units we're going to be working in is milliliters and liters. So let's move on. So when we look at this jug here, okay, we want to know how much juice is in this jug. Now, straight away, we can see at the top, we've got a litre, and then in the middle, we've got 500 milliliters. It's interesting to note that we've got two different units on here. So what we need to make sure that we've done is we understand a particular maths fact. And that maths fact is that there are 1,000 milliliters in a litre. So 1 litre equals 1,000 milliliters, 2 litres equals 2,000 milliliters. Hopefully you can spot a pattern there. So 3 litres would be 3,000 milliliters. If I've got half a litre, then I also know that I have got half of that 1,000 milliliters. So I know that half of 1,000 is 500. So let's have a little look at this. Let's go back to this jug. So when we're looking at this jug, if we know that this is 1 litre up here, we also know that's the same as saying 1,000 milliliters. There we go, let's type that in there. There we go. And if we can tell that this here is 500 milliliters, so ml, what we can then look at is this. We've got these little lines here. Now you might think, oh, these are quite familiar. That's because they are intervals. So just like when we were measuring mass and we looked at the scales and the scales had intervals, so does a measuring jug. So in this case then, let's have a little workout of what each interval might be worth. So let's count up. The easiest one to start with is to try 100s to see if it works. So let's try 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. So that worked because I actually landed on the 500 when I said 500. So what does that tell us? That each interval is worth 100 milliliters each. Okay, so in that case then, how much juice is in this jug? Let's see if we can work it out. So each of these is worth 100 milliliters. So we've gone 100, 200, 300, and then the line that the juice stops at is actually 400 milliliters. So when I write down an amount, I write down the number, but then I also write down my unit. In this case, it's an M and an L, so milliliters. Okay, let's move on. Have a little look at these. You might want to pause the video and just have a think about what it's showing us here. Okay, so what you might have noticed is that actually a lot of the scale is very similar to the jug that we just looked at. So if you count up in 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 milliliters, it's pretty much the same scale, isn't it? But what do you notice about where the juice is for each of these jugs, for each of these measuring jugs? That's right, it's right in between each of those intervals. So if we know each interval is worth 100 milliliters, what we then need to understand is what might be in between those intervals. What might be the number in between? Well, if I know that each interval is worth 100, I know that directly in the middle then must be 50. So for this, I work this out by thinking each interval is 100 milliliters, but then I need to half this number because it is halfway between an interval. So let's have a look. We can go from 500. We don't need to start from the bottom here. So 500, 600, 700. The juice hasn't quite got up to 800, so I know it's 700. It's right in the middle. So 700, I want to add that 50 on that we just talked about. I've actually got 750 milliliters here. There we go. Now we're going to look at the other jug and we're going to do the same thing. So it's the same scale. So 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. But again, the juice stops midway between two intervals. So let's try that out. So I can count from 500 again because I can see where the 500 is. So 600, 700, 800, 900. I haven't quite got up to that 1 litre or 1,000 milliliters. It's in between. So I know that it's 900 plus the 50 that we'd already worked out. So my answer is 950 milliliters. There we go. Okay, let's move on. Let's look at these litre buckets. So in each of these buckets, we can already see actually, they both hold at the top there 5 litres. But how many litres have I got underneath? So when we're looking at just litres, what we can do is think, well, actually, how many litres are there in there? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 intervals. So if I've got 5 intervals, this is quite helpful because 5 intervals makes 5 litres for these buckets. So I can count up, it stops at 1, 2, 3 litres. So it stops at that third interval and I do a 3 and a little L. Let's look at this one. This one's quite easy because you can see the water in this bucket has gone all the way up to the top of the interval there. So I can see straight away that that is worth 5 litres. So this one's got more in. Okay, brilliant. So let's move on. This one is a little bit more tricky, so we want to be really careful with this one. So when we look at these jugs, what we have got here is we can see there's 10 and 20 litres marked on the scale. So looking up the scale, let's have a little look. How many intervals have we got? And you can see that some are longer than others. So I've got a little interval followed by a big interval. I'm actually going to count just the big intervals to begin with. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So it's taken me 5 jumps to get to 10 litres. So in my mind, what I'm thinking is that if it's taken me 5 jumps to get to 10 litres and I'm missing out one each time, there we go, I'm actually able to work something out. So really, it's almost like I'm counting in twos, isn't it? So 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 because I used 5 jumps to get there. These little intervals in between could almost be our ones. So if this is 2, 4, 6, then this is 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. So this scale, although it looks tricky, actually it isn't. Once you've figured out that actually it's counting in twos and you look at those smaller intervals, these smaller intervals are actually only counting in ones. So let's have a look at how much we've got in this jug. So I'm going to go from the 10 litres here. I don't need to count up every single interval to get there. So I'm going to count from 10. Now I could jump up here 2. So 10 add another 2 litres will give me 12. Or if it's easier and you want to count the small interval in between, you can go 10, 11 at the small interval, and then 12 at the larger interval. So here I've actually got 12 litres. Now let's have a little look at this one. This one is below 10 litres. You can see the watermark there is way below. It doesn't go up to 10 litres. So I know that the number I'm looking for must be less than 10. So I'm going to count up 2, 4, 6. Oh, it doesn't go up to the 8th one. It goes up one more there. So I know my answer there is 7 litres. There we go. Have a little look at this one. Can you spot what the interval should be? Okay, so let's try and work it out. So, like we did before, we need to work out what the intervals are. We've got these longer intervals here, these big, thick, bold ones, and then we've got some smaller ones. Now, looking at where the water stops at this jug, I can see that actually it's less than 1,000 milliliters. It's more than 750, but in order to work out how much it is, I need to be able to work out what these smaller intervals are worth. So let's have a little look. Let's try counting in 100s. Does that work? So 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. Nope, it's not working counting in hundreds. Let's try something else. Let's try counting in less than 100s. Let's try counting in 50s. So I can go 50, 100, 150, 200, haha, 250. So each of these milliliters is actually worth, each of these intervals is actually worth 50 milliliters. Okay, so then when I'm looking up here, that makes it much easier to count on. And at the beginning of our lesson today, our warm-up was thinking about counting in 50s. So what a coincidence. So I'm actually going to start from here. I'm going to start from this big interval. I'm going to go from 750 and I'm going to count up in 50s from there. So I'm going to go 750, then 800, 850, 900, and 950 here. So there we go. So 950 milliliters, very, very close to 1,000 milliliters. And of course, we know that fact now. We know that 1,000 milliliters is the same as 1 liter. Okay, so here is our silver task for today. Your job for today is to look at these 4 jugs, and I would like you to tell me the volume of liquid, so how much liquid is in each of the jugs. Can you pause the video here and give it a go? Okay, how did you get on? Let's look at some of those answers. So have a little look through. Did you spot that this scale here was slightly different? The rest of them all went up to 1,000 milliliters. This one only went up to 500. So although the jugs may look the same size, you need to be very careful and check the scale. Tick off the ones you got correct. And if you want to move on to our gold task, then let's go. Okay, so we've got some problem solving today. We want to match each of these 3 containers to one of the children. So each of the children has a container, but we need to work out from their clues which is which. So Annie says, I have exactly half a litre. Eva says, I have more than 300 milliliters, but less than 400 milliliters. Amir says, I have 1,000 milliliters. Pause the video here and see if you can match up the containers to the children. Okay, how did you get on? Have a little look. So hopefully you got that Amir was container A because of course 1 litre is the same as 1,000 milliliters. Annie says, I have exactly half a litre. And if 1 litre is the same as 1,000 milliliters, then B would be her container because 500 milliliters is half of 1,000 milliliters. And Eva was container C because she has more than 300 but less than 400. So you would have needed to use those intervals to help you work that out there. So tick off the ones you got correct. And if you want to give the platinum task a go, let's move on. Okay, so very similar to last week when we were looking at maths, it is going to require a bit more time in the kitchen with your grown-up. So with an adult, and especially with an adult for this particular one, I'd like you to look at some of the packaging of the drinks and liquids in your home. Are you able to make a list of 5 items that are measured in litres and a list of 5 items that are measured in milliliters? I'm looking forward to seeing your list and what kinds of things are measured in litres and what is in milliliters. But that's the end of our maths there for today. So I hope you've had a really, really good morning and I'll see you tomorrow for some more maths. Take care.